Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. When we decided at Bridges Foundation to deal with the insulting cartoon in Denmark, the cartoon crisis in 2006, we set a goal for ourselves. Then we worked to achieve this goal. This is how we always work. We have to set a goal first. We made a plan and phased goals. During analyzing the cartoon crisis, we found that we will deal with the most challenging group of people to deal with in any country, and that's journalists. We usually measure our success or failure in correcting the image of Islam among non-Muslims through a questionnaire, forms that are distributed after our lectures, and people fill it out. We found that 92% of the attendees of our lectures changed their position to a better position from Islam and Muslims, 92%. And they changed their idea to a better idea about Islam. 7.5% remain as negative as they were, and about 0.5% converts to Islam. This means that our success rate in correcting the image of Islam is about 92.5%. But with journalists, frankly, our best hope was to achieve 10%. If we can change the idea of 10% of them only about Islam to a better idea, that would be a success. If 10% of Danish journalists come to support Islam and Muslims, this would be awesome and a great achievement. So we held a preparatory meeting with the British journalist Yvonne Ridley, who attended in Egypt. He came to Egypt and she attended with us. And we set a goal to correct the image of Islam and of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam at the highest possible rates. And our best hope was to get 10 to 15% of them to change their position. So one of the phased goals of the plan was to attract as many journalists as possible to attend our conference, because that conference was not open for the public. It was closed only on journalists and politicians. And I was afraid that they would boycott the conference, especially since Muslims all over the world started a boycott against Danish products. There have been a smear campaign for any Danish involved anywhere in any dialogue with Muslims within Denmark also. So the people could have been afraid to get into any dialogue with Muslims too. So I went several times to prepare for the conference. I went to Denmark several times before the conference. I asked about the best conference ever held in Denmark and was well attended by journalists especially. And they said it was the Baha'i conference. They held a year ago a conference, and the Baha'is held it, and it was well attended. 3 people who attended the conference. What was the most that attracted you to attend? What attracted you to attend the conference of the Baha'is? And 2 of the 3 people told me the invitation. The invitation was very special and attracted us to attend. So I decided to make an invitation that they had never seen before. I went back to Egypt and I met with the founders of one of the biggest companies in the marketing arena, and we brainstormed together and we came up with a very beautiful idea. Our invitation form will be a 3D card box with a picture of a bridge on it, a symbol for building bridges between cultures. Then if you open the box, you don't find an invitation but a chocolate bar, a small chocolate bar, on which there is a sticker. On it, it states the conference venue, Copenhagen Marriott Hotel, and the conference date and the conference time on the sticker on the chocolate bar. If you lift the chocolate bar to eat it, you will find a colored invitation folded and located under the bar, and it contains all the details of the conference and the speakers. Even the menu of the dinner that we are going to serve. Also, my main lecture, the main lecture was my lecture, and it was titled, Freedom of Speech Has No Limits in Islam. Of course, at that time, the main disagreement between the East and the West was freedom of speech and freedom of expression. The West says there are no limits for freedom of speech. The East and the Islamic world says there are limits for freedom of speech. So when the Imam who is coming from Egypt says freedom of speech has no limits in Islam, then there is a story to write. It can be written about in newspapers, in the newspapers. It deserves to come and to attend and to hear. This was a means of attracting as many of them to come and attend. My whole goal at this point was to attract the journalists to come to the conference room and not to interrupt the conference or not to boycott the conference, so that it doesn't fail. So when the person opens the invitation box, he finds in the back of the lid of the box a beautiful phrase that says, the peoples of the East and the West are the branches of the same tree. And if a person looks at the root of the tree, he will find so and so. So very nice words, very beautiful words, peaceful words about human brotherhood and the commonalities between peoples of the East and the West. But these words are signed by an unknown Danish name, Knud Holmboe, unknown person. We created a website for him, by the way, knud-holmboe.com. Certainly, every one of those journalists who will open the invitation will find this beautiful phrase, and he will see a Danish name under this phrase. So he will definitely enter the website. When he enters the website, imagine what he or she will find. Who is Knud Holmboe? Who is this Danish person who is saying those beautiful words? He is actually the first convert to Islam. Okay? The first convert in Denmark to Islam. And what was his occupation? He was a journalist, like them. Okay, how did he die? He died as a martyr of freedom of speech. The one who killed him was Mussolini, because he refused what he wanted from him. He refused to be dictated by Mussolini. Mussolini was dictating on him that he should not publish certain things. And this was Allah's favor upon us. I mean, Allah supported us regarding our conference by discovering the story of this first convert to Islam in Denmark, and to find out that he was a journalist, and our main problem is with journalists. And he died as a martyr of freedom of speech, and our main problem with them is about freedom of speech. So when this all appeared, and they discovered that the reason of his death was freedom of speech, they came in big numbers actually to the conference. This attracted 207. Oh, okay. I remember that we sent out 277 invitations. 135 journalists came out of 277. That's amazing, by the way. And 10 politicians also attended, in addition to about 35 Muslims. So the attendance was about 190 to 200 people. So what is the story of Knud Holmboe and how I used it in the conference then? Because I had to research the roots of Islam in the country where I am going to speak. So I searched the roots of Islam in the country, in Denmark, and I found that the first one to convert was a young man named Knud Holmboe. He was 27 years old, and he was working as a journalist. He embraced Islam after a journey in search for the truth, in which he entered a Christian monastery in France. He found nothing interesting for him in Christianity, and he wasn't satisfied spiritually. Then he embraced Islam, and he named himself Ali Knud Holmboe, and he wanted to perform Hajj, pilgrimage. So he bought a Chevrolet in Morocco, and he started a drive through the North African desert heading to Mecca. And he wrote his memories in a book called Brenner, which is The Desert is Burning. Actually, it is called in English The Desert Encounter. He wrote his adventures and his chronicles in this book, and that he had an American guy named Starbucks actually with him, and this guy died on this way through the desert, and he buried him on the way. One of the things that he got thirsty in the desert, that he had to drink the water from his car radiator in order not to die. A guide accompanied him, a young Libyan teenager guide named Muhammad. Then the book began to get serious when he started talking about his trip in the Libyan desert, and that he was arrested by the Italians who were colonizing Libya at that time. And he also wrote about his closeness to the leader of the resistance, Omar al-Mukhtar, until he became one of the assistants of Omar al-Mukhtar. He became actually his private photographer. He transmitted messages between Omar al-Mukhtar and King Idris al-Senussi, who was exiled in Cairo. So he carried messages from Omar al-Mukhtar to Cairo and back. In his book, he recorded daily executions in Benghazi. He says 30 executions by hanging in Benghazi every day, and he's recording this with photographs that he took himself. He recorded the atrocities of the Italian fascist occupation. He stood for the truth against falsehood. He stood with the oppressed against the oppressor. And he took 2 photos that caused him to be assassinated. 2 photos of Italian officers detained in the detention camps of the Mujahideen, of Omar al-Mukhtar and the revolutionaries. So Mussolini's regime wanted to bribe him so that he wouldn't publish these photos, so that it won't be an embarrassment for them, and so that the Italian people would not know that the Libyan resistance is also taking prisoners from among the Italian officers. They didn't want them to know that Italian officers are falling into captivity too. So Mussolini sent a German agent, and his name was Hans Joachim, and he met Knud Holmboe before Hajj in Jordan and tried to bribe him. He offered him a big lump sum of money. This is a blank check. Just put the number you want, but don't publish these photos and this information. And he refused. He refused to compromise his freedom of speech. This man understood the hadith of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that says, if one day you see my nation afraid of telling a tyrant that he's a tyrant, then there is no hope for them. And what do tyrants do? Tyrants kill. And though Prophet Muhammad is still saying that we should not be afraid of telling a tyrant to his face that he's a tyrant, which means stand up, against oppressors and stand up against tyrants, even if this may cost you your life. Why? Because you will die one day. Die with dignity instead of dying on your knees. Die on your feet, but not on your knees. And he also said that the best of martyrs is Hamza, and a person who stands against a tyrant, enjoining him, telling him what is right and what is wrong, forbidding him from evil, and that tyrant kills him because he spoke the truth. So he understood that death is not the end. Rather, it is the start of a new life, the real life, the everlasting life, in which the soul is freed from the prisons of this world. Freedom of expression has no limits in Islam. It should be practiced even if the price is losing your own life. But it has a direction against the oppressor, not the oppressed. And then I addressed the journalists in the conference room, and I told them, and you Danish journalists were the spark that ignited. And that was obvious from one of the questions on the forum. It says, did your respect to Prophet Muhammad increase after the presentation? And 55% of them checked yes. My respect to Prophet Muhammad increased after the presentation. So our success rate was 55%. Although we only wanted 10%. We only dreamt of 10%. Also, they wrote, how can we make the whole world know about this great Muslim? Who's that? Knud Holmboe. So they became proud that one of them, and who was a Muslim as well, they became proud of a Muslim Danish person, and they wanted to tell the whole world about him. Because I had to reserve some names and some events so that no one would be harmed or disagree with me. So some people are still in their positions here. So the lessons of today's story is that the secret to success of any business after God's grace is good planning before action. Even in Islamic work, in charity, in charities, you must have a clear goal. Then you evaluate your words and your actions and see if this goal will be achieved through these words or these actions. Go for it. If not, then don't. So there must be always good planning before Islamic events and Islamic work. And Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you very much for your time. Assalamu alaikum.